In 1999, Josh Hamilton was the most talented baseball player on the planet.
Business. It's where that is.
For quite a spell.
The #1 overall pick, a generational talent. Then he vanished for 3 years. And what brought him back is something nobody talks about. You're about to find out the real story behind one of sports' greatest disappearances, and the miracle that made his return possible. Have you ever wondered what it actually looks like when a human being, someone with the world at their feet, just stops being a person and becomes a ghost? We hear about athletes busting all the time, but what happened to Josh Hamilton wasn't a typical bust. It was a disappearance so complete that for over 1,000 days, the most famous baseball prospect in the country was effectively gone from the face of the earth. In the summer of 1999, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays didn't just draft a player. They drafted what scouts called the natural. He was a physical freak of nature. 6'4", 230 pounds, capable of throwing a baseball 96 miles per hour from the mound and swinging a bat with a terrifying speed of 110 miles per hour. The Devil Rays were so certain that he was the next Mickey Mantle that they handed him a $3.96 million signing bonus, which at the time was a staggering record for a high school player. Imagine being 18 years old and having a $4 million check dropped into your lap because people believe you're the second coming of Babe Ruth. He was the consensus #1 pick, a blue chip prospect whose future wasn't bright, it was guaranteed. But how does a kid with that kind of support and that much talent end up waking up in a filthy trailer with a group of strangers having no idea what year it is? The mystery of those 3 missing years, from 2003 to 2006, is where the story turns into a psychological thriller. During this time, Hamilton wasn't just injured or resting. He was a missing person. He had vanished into the shadows of North Carolina and Florida, burning through almost every cent of that $4 million bonus on substances and alcohol. The powerhouse athlete who once weighed 230 pounds of pure muscle had withered away into a skeletal 180-pound frame. His skin had turned into a ghost-like shade of gray, and his body was slowly being covered in 26 different tattoos. Many of them tribal signs he didn't understand or dark images of the devil. So how does someone like this just disappear? To find that answer, we have to look at one single afternoon in February 2001 that changed everything. Hamilton was driving with his parents in Florida during spring training when a dump truck ran a red light and T-boned their Chevy Silverado. He walked away from the crash, but his parents were severely injured and had to move back to North Carolina for a long road of rehab. For the first time in his life, the 20-year-old superstar was in constant, excruciating back pain. He had millions of dollars in the bank, and he was completely unsupervised. The 2 things that had defined his existence, baseball and his parents, were gone at the exact same moment. Without that structure, he didn't just stumble, he fell into a void. Have you ever felt like once you cross a certain line, there's no way to turn back? For Hamilton, that line was a local tattoo shop in Florida. He started spending his idle time there, drinking and eventually trying substances. He had never touched a drop of alcohol in high school, but at age 20, he took his first drink and reportedly chased it with a hard substance. It was a pattern break that no one saw coming. The clean-cut kid from a religious family becoming a regular in the dark corners of the substance world. By 2003, the Devil Rays began to realize their $4 million investment was evaporating. Hamilton was showing up late to practice, failing drug tests, and then he simply stopped showing up at all. MLB stepped in with a 30-day suspension in early 2004, which quickly spiraled into a year-long ban, and finally, an indefinite suspension from the game he loved. He was banned from 2003 to 2005 for abusing alcohol and a list of substances. He was in and out of rehab 8 different times, but the monster was always waiting for him the moment he walked out the door. During these years, Hamilton wasn't an athlete. He was a man who spent his nights punching out the windshields of cars and standing in his front yard screaming at his family in the middle of the night. He once even broke a baseball bat across his own leg in a fit of rage because he couldn't handle the person person he had become. Can you imagine the frustration of a man who could hit a ball 500 feet but couldn't control his own hands? He was sleeping on floors in crack houses and trailers, unrecognizable from the Golden Boy Scouts once fought over. The gut punch moment came in October 2005. Hamilton woke up from a massive binge in a trailer surrounded by people he didn't know. He was financially broke, his spirit was destroyed, and his wife, Katie, had finally kicked him out of their home. He had nowhere left to go but to the one person who would still take him in, his maternal grandmother, Mary Holt. He showed up at her door looking like a ghost, weighing 60 pounds less than his playing weight. But even at his grandmother's house, the addiction didn't let go. On his fourth day there, he bought more and holed up in his room to get high. When he finally emerged, he found his grandmother waiting for him in the hallway with a deep look of sorrow in her eyes. She said 6 simple words. "I can't take this anymore, Josh." Those words did what 8 trips to rehab couldn't. He realized it was time to get clean or die. But what finally pulled him out? It wasn't a coach, it wasn't a professional team, it wasn't more money, it was a bathroom. In 2005, a former minor league player and coach named Roy Silver read a newspaper article about Hamilton's desire to return to the game. Silver ran a Christian-based baseball academy in Florida called the Winning Inning, and he offered Hamilton a deal. He could use the facility to train, but only if he worked there. And we aren't talking about coaching young kids. Josh Hamilton, the former #1 pick, spent his days mowing the grass, taking out the trash, and cleaning the toilets of the facility. He slept on an air mattress in one of the facility's small offices. This was a novelty moment, the pattern break that the sports world didn't expect. Instead of a high-priced training facility, he was finding his soul in manual labor and faith-based recovery. To stay sober, he followed rules that were almost impossibly strict. He rarely carried more than $10 in his wallet, his wife handled every cent of their finances, and he submitted to drug tests 3 times every single week. He had to prove to Major League Baseball that he was more than just a talented addict. He had to show them he was a reliable human being. In June 2006, after 8 months of sobriety, MLB finally allowed him to return to minor league games. But the Devil Rays were still terrified of his history. They didn't protect him on their roster, which made him eligible for the Rule 5 drafts, a process where other teams can take a chance on unprotected players. This led to one of the most legendary gambles in history. The Cincinnati Reds wanted him, but they didn't have a high enough pick. Their scouting director, Chris Buckley, met with the Chicago Cubs scouting director at a gala and struck a deal on a cocktail napkin. The Cubs would draft Hamilton 3rd overall and immediately trade him to the Reds for $100,000. When Hamilton finally walked onto a major league field for the first time on April 2nd, 2007, the tension was unbearable. He was making his debut as a pinch hitter against the Cubs, the team that had technically drafted him from the Reds. When he stepped into the batter's box, the crowd gave him a 22-second standing ovation. Can you imagine the nerves? Can you imagine being dead to the world for 3 years and then hearing 40,000 people cheer for the fact that you survived? He didn't even get a hit that day, but it didn't matter. He was back. And a few days later, he hit a home run in his first career start, proving that the talent hadn't been burned away by the crack pipe. But could he actually sustain a career at the highest level while fighting a monster every single day? The 2008 season was the moment the world realized that the natural was real. Hamilton was traded to the Texas Rangers, and suddenly he wasn't just a survivor, he was a superstar. He led the league in RBIs and was selected to the All-Star game. But the moment that America fell back in love with him happened on a humid night at the old Yankee Stadium during the Home Run Derby. He chose a 71-year-old volunteer named Clay Counsell to throw to him, the same man who had thrown him batting practice when he was a little kid. In the first round, Hamilton put on the most dominant performance the event had ever seen, hitting a record 28 home runs. He hit 13 of them in a row. Some of those balls traveled over 500 feet, with one hitting the back wall of the stadium 518 feet away. Even though he technically lost the final round because of the scoring format, he was the only person anyone talked about. He had gone from a crack house to the king of Yankee Stadium in less than 3 years. By 2010, he reached the absolute peak, winning the American League MVP with a .359 batting average and leading the Rangers to the World Series. To keep him on this path, the Rangers had to build a fortress of accountability around him. They hired an accountability partner named Johnny Nairn, who stayed in a hotel room next to him on every road trip. Nairn even held Hamilton's $80 daily meal money to make sure he didn't have enough cash in his pocket to buy drugs. Hamilton lived a life of park, home, park, home. He avoided going out after games and continued to take those drug tests 3 times a week, looking forward to them because they were proof of his survival. This is what 3 lost years actually cost him. And yet, look what he built anyway. He proved that even when you're broken, your talent can still shine if you have the structure to protect it. But here's what everyone gets wrong about this story. Most people frame Josh Hamilton as a simple cautionary tale about the dangers of fame and money. But if you ask him, he frames himself as proof that the fall was necessary. Would he have been this version of himself without the crash? Without the toilets? Without the air mattress? Did you know that throughout his recovery, he would often have dreams so vivid that he'd wake up smelling the crack pipe? He said the P-test guy would even haunt his dreams, standing there waiting for him to fail. It shows that the pressure of being the natural never truly left him, even when he was at the top of the world. In his book Beyond Belief, he admitted that he couldn't rehabilitate his soul without being completely honest about the darkness he faced. He took full responsibility for his choices, refusing to blame the truck driver or the devil rays for his descent. But here's what most people don't know. The monster never fully went away. In 2009, at the peak of his Rangers career, Hamilton walked into a bar in Arizona and relapsed with alcohol. He didn't hide it. The next morning, he called his wife and then called the team. No lawyers, no spin, just a man admitting he'd slipped. The Rangers kept him. His wife kept him. It was a reminder that sobriety isn't a finish line. It's a daily decision that never gets easier. And in 2013, after signing a $125 million contract with the Los Angeles Angels, the pressure of a new city and a new team proved to be more than his structure could hold. He relapsed again, this time with a substance. The Angels, rather than wrapping a fortress of accountability around him the way the Rangers had, traded him back to Texas and paid $68 million just to make him someone else's problem. His body, battered by years of substance abuse and the physical grind of baseball, gave out shortly after. He retired in 2015. The numbers he put up in those years should have been impossible for someone who lost 3 prime seasons to crack houses and trailers. Josh Hamilton lived on both sides of that line, sometimes in the same year. He was the #1 pick who vanished, but he was also the man who cleaned toilets to find his way home. But in the end, his story is a reminder that we're all just human, and our greatest victories and deepest failures are often separated by the thinnest of margins. Subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the legendary icons and the moments that changed everything.